About a year ago, FiiO released their flagship K17 all-in-one combo that had a ton of sound enhancements and lots of features. However, it had an Achilles heel, and combining THX AAA headphone amplifier section with ESS-able DAC chips, all powered by a switching mode power supply, the sound was not exactly what I have envisioned a flagship unit should have. After dropping my K19 video, I even met the funky FiiO audio team at the Munich high-end show last year, and I explained why going further with THX AAA circuitry is not a very good idea, and why going with discrete components such as transistors and diodes is a much better idea, especially for desktop devices. And I hoped to see a beefier unit with a linear transformer, and I'm happy to tell you that the unit I envisioned a long time ago is finally sitting on my table. This one is called FiiO K17. It goes for $999 US. We have a lot of ground to cover today. This is probably the most exciting FiiO device I've tested as of late, and let's check it out in the usual fashion. I think it looks kinda cool. The retro vibe, the analog switches, the big display, 2 knobs, 3 headphone jacks, a ton of connectivity options, all wrapped in a metallic case, makes a lot of sense to me. We no longer have a switching mode power supply, we no longer have THX AAA circuitry, but a fully discrete unit that automatically means it will generate a lot of heat. That's precisely why every side panel, top and bottom plate have a lot of ventilation holes, so that hot air could move freely outside its case. What's cool about it is that FiiO added lots of protection systems, such as overload protection, overcurrent protection, temperature protection for its headphone amp circuitry, and also for its linear transformer, something that I usually see on much higher priced units. It does look like a brick, but there's a coolness factor to it as well, I believe. The 7.8-inch screen is a nice touch, and having USB Type-C connections on its front and back panels is another nice touch. Hiding the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antennas is another cool touch, and overall I like the old vibes I'm getting with this unit on my table. In terms of connectivity, we get pretty much every digital input except for AAC and BNC. We even have an Ethernet input to use it as a Roon endpoint or as an AirPlay enabled unit, and the USB Type-A port lets you connect a USB flash drive or an external SSD for offline music playback. The K17 is not just a DAC and headphone amplifier. You can use it as a DAC and preamp, you can lock the voltage output when used in line-out mode. It's quite versatile if you ask me. Its UI is quite straightforward. Since we have a 7.8-inch touchscreen, a simple swipe to the right will reveal almost every single feature. We have 6 digital filters to choose from, several EQ options, and even 10 custom EQ presets that you can save on your PC and then load to the K17. You can even enable the driverless USB 1.0 protocol, meaning that you can connect it to your favorite gaming console via USB and game with a much higher quality sound. A swipe to the left lets you select a desired input, and everything else is controlled by the analog switches and knobs you can see on the front plate. Under its hood is where all of the magic is happening, and I kid you not, once I saw that linear transformer, those 8 transistors working for its current buffer stage, and also those 2 flagship grade AKM AK4499EX with its complementary Delta Sigma modulator, it was clear to me that this one will sound like nothing else that FiiO has ever done. So gone is the switching mount power supply and also the THX AAA headphone amplifier circuitry, and finally we have the classic transistor sound that I longed to see in FiiO devices for a couple of years now. The power output is quite substantial, and even if we have just 4 watts on this one versus 8 watts on K19, these 4 watts are slightly beefier in a way because more current is flowing through those transistors. That will have a beneficial impact on planar magnetic headphones, so these are in a way higher quality watts compared to what we have on the K19. For a lower channel crosstalk, FiiO decided to go with 3 separate boards that won't interfere with each other. One is for the power supply, one for the digital section, and another one for the analog circuitry, ensuring a clearer sound. Last but not least, only high-grade capacitors have been used everywhere. Nikicons for the power regulation stage, LNASIL MIC2 at the current buffer stage, and Panasonic film capacitors at the output stage. So in truth, FiiO didn't economize on this one, using only high-grade components for a purer sound transmission without degradation. In the usual fashion, we have 3 femtosecond clocks, 2 used for PCM material and 1 for DSD. If you are into streaming, then K17 can be used wired via Ethernet up to 1 gigabit speeds, or wirelessly, since we have a 2.4 and a 5 GHz Wi-Fi module. Bluetooth is also a thing, but I do not see a reason to use Bluetooth since it sounds so much nicer via any other digital input. There is so much more about the K17, and if you want to learn more about its inner workings, I will leave a link below for K17's official webpage. Since I'm in the process of reviewing HiFiMan's latest HE1000 Unveiled, Susvara Unveiled, I decided to use these headphones with K17, and since I know the sound of the T+A Solitaire P and also Susvara OG very well, I decided to use all these 4 headphones to assess the sound of the K17. First of all, I say that we're not getting the ultra-linear and lightweight sound of the K19. This time around the sound is more dynamic, it's little livelier sounding. There's an extra rumble in the bass that could be felt, and more importantly, the sound got tons of meat on the bone. Lots of naturalness rushed in, things that sadly weren't present on the K19. This is exactly the sound that I was longing for, punchy and dynamic in the mornings when coffee is not doing its thing, organic, natural and pleasing at midday with all sorts of stuff that I'm listening, and also relaxing and soothing in the evenings without adding any kind of harshness of listening fatigue. So this is what we're getting with K17. And I'm glad to tell you that finally FiiO has found a winning formula that works not only for audiophiles, but also for music lovers and also for gamers, because it works outstanding via USB with a gaming console such as PS5. It worked flawlessly with my gaming PC as well. For a couple of years now, FiiO has been using that THX AAA circuitry in most of the devices, portable, transportable, desktop. And it was cool back in the day, but in time I realized that once those were lowering, distortion and noise floor, they were also lowering the engagement factor. The music was simply drained of the life, and it was no longer as vivid and colorful and natural and organic. It was a little bit lifeless sounding in a way. I've tested a good deal of THX AAA headphone amplifiers, and you can find most of them on this channel. I owned most of them as well, and I know exactly how those sound, but in time I realized that this is not exactly how music is supposed to sound. This is not how I want my music to sound. In time I realized that they are not doing proper justice to music. So that's why I started moving to all discrete headphone amplifiers, tube headphone amplifiers, and I'm glad to say that this one is no longer sounding like an old DAC combo released by FiiO. This one is delivering more oomph in the bass, more energy and life in the mid-range, and simply calms a little bit the upper treble as well. Seeing lots of discrete components inside, but more importantly transistors and diodes and a proper filtering stage, made my day so much brighter, since I knew exactly what to expect from K17, and it didn't disappoint. Since this thing is Roon enabled, I just powered on my Roon server that you can see behind me, the Rockna Wave Dream Net. I also powered on the K17, I've added an Ethernet cable, and from Roon software on my smartphone I just enabled K17 as a Roon endpoint, and voila! I can now stream music from Tidal and Qobuz directly to K17. And if you want to know which digital input sounded best, then that's Ethernet via Roon or AirPlay via my wife's iPhone. Streaming music via AirPlay is so much easier since you no longer need a Roon server to be installed. You just fire up your favorite music streaming software on your iOS device like Tidal, Qobuz, Apple Music, so on and so forth. Select K17 via AirPlay and start streaming music to it. These two features were implemented so well and it always sounded so good that I didn't see the reason of using any other digital input. I used USB for a couple of times with my PC, and after installing its drivers and selecting it as the main output device, I was able to use Tidal and Qobuz installed on my PC. I watched a few videos on YouTube, I even gamed for an hour or two. In all of these cases, the K17 performed as expected. Let's talk a little bit about the power output, about the headphone amplifier section. First of all, we have 5 gain settings: low, mid, high, super high and ultra high, but the last 2 settings should be used mostly with hard to drive planars and also with high impedance dynamic headphones. Low, medium and high should be used mostly with ultra sensitive IMs and also with sensitive desktop headphones such as Grados and Focals. We have just 4 watts of power as previously mentioned versus 8 on K19, but in my humble opinion these are higher quality watts. And if you ever used a fully discrete headphone amplifier powered by a linear transformer, then you know exactly what to expect from K17 because it sounds exactly like that. So there is a little bit more life in here, it's more texture, everything is livelier, more fun sounding compared to K19. Everything is simply a little bit punchier, more dynamic, more natural, you can say so, and less harsh, less digital, less ultra-linear in a way compared to K19. So the first headphone that I tried was HE1000 Unveiled. The maximum volume I could reach on its volume knob was 50 with modern tracks and 55 out of 100 steps available with something like jazz, blues and classical music. So clearly I had a ton of headroom remaining on top, but more importantly HE1000 Unveiled sounded properly how I would expect from a fully discrete headphone amplifier. So this is not exactly fully discrete because we have the voltage stage is amplified by op amps and the current buffer stage by transistors. But the current buffer stage is actually considerably more important, especially with planar headphones, and I can feel them simply energized with lots of fun factor because the bass is quite playful on all of these headphones. A few minutes later, I decided to use the Headphone Susvara Unveiled together with the Susvara OG. And if you know these two headphones, these are incredibly hard to drive and they need an amplifier that usually costs you an arm and a leg. So they need lots of power to be fully driven and controlled and so on and so forth. So the volume went much higher. I arrived at around 75 with modern tunes and 80 out of 100 with older tunes. What was interesting is that the sound was not breaking down. Distortion was not happening in the bass. I could go even much louder, but again, distortion was not there. But the sound was no longer so 3D. The sound was much closer to my face, and from a 3D sounding amplifier, it became more like a 2D. The sound was no longer dynamic and punchy, so clearly I felt the limitations of the headphone amplifier section. I would say that up to T+A Solitaire P, HE1000 Unveiled, HD800S, this one will easily drive all of these headphones, but it won't be my top choice for a BIS 1266, DCA Stealth and Expanse, and also Headphone Susvara OG, Susvara Unveiled and HE6. The K19 was an absolute beast when it came to sound transparency, detail retrieval, resolution on the micro scale, especially when used as a Roon endpoint. And I'll say something similar about the K17 with the exception that this one is no longer sharp sounding in the treble and I don't get any kind of listening fatigue. This one is softer sounding and the overall rendition of the music is more organic and it's pouring more naturally compared to K19. And a couple of years ago, I would surely choose the K19 over this one because I was into that ultra sharp, ultra detailed, ultra everything sound. But right now, I don't care about those things anymore. I want to be carried away by music. I want to feel something while listening to music. I want to get some goosebumps while listening to music, and that's what happens more often on K17 versus K19. The empty shell sound of K19 is no longer present on K17. This one provides a more complete experience top to bottom. In absolute terms, the K19 is still a little bit clearer sounding. An extra thin layer of sound is presented to me that isn't there on the K17. However, this guy wins me over with its soothing voice, warmer and sweeter tonality that scares away listening fatigue. I always loved the way FiiO handled dynamics, not only with their desktop devices, but also with their portable and transportable units, especially beefier ones like Q7 and M17. You can tell that these guys are into fast transients because the sound was never slowing down, and that is not going to change today with the K17. This one is ultra fast sounding. But you know what's more impressive on this one is not the speed of sound, but the kick you'll be getting into your eardrums, especially if you stay away from ultra hard to drive headphones that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. So if you wait for around 30 or 45 minutes of warm-up, because those power transistors, they need some warm-up, the sound will get thicker, punchier, there will be more rumble in the bass. And it's not exactly on the same level with something like Roon S70 Pro, but it's more impressive compared to Roon S9C. That I reviewed a while ago. It's incredibly difficult making a punchy sounding all-in-one at around 1 kilobuck, but these guys found a way to make it so, and if you are into modern music, you love a stronger kick in the bass, then the K17 will deliver on all of those promises. The noise floor was never a concern on FiiO devices, regardless if those were portable, transportable or desktop units. These guys are making a ton of IMs from affordable to expensive, so it makes sense to have this noise-free ecosystem. In my case, I use their FH19 and also FA19 IMs, which are very sensitive, via the 4.4mm balanced output, so it provides maximum power on this jack. And as long as I stayed on the low, medium and high gain settings, this one was completely noise-free. I went even much louder, even maximum volume, and it was still completely noise-free. Only when I moved to ultra high gain and super high gain settings, some noise was passing through, so clearly those two gain settings were created for ultra hard to drive headphones or just, high impedance dynamic headphones, and everything else was created for IMs and for sensitive desktop headphones like Grados and Focals. Soundstage is always a controversial topic, especially when discussing headphones, but still let's talk a little bit about that. In my case, I had the nicest stereo separation when I used this one as a Roon endpoint via that Ethernet connection. Funny thing, it was less airy sounding when used via AirPlay and less so when used via its USB connection, sounding a little bit closer to my face and not so 3D. K17 was more than good in this regard, pretty much on the same level with K19, but at the same time it was not as impressive like the Xdo TA32 staying in its vicinity. If TA32 easily got a 10 out of 10 in terms of soundstage and stereo separation and depth, then K17 gets an 8 out of 10, still highlighting the pinpoint location of the notes, but without making the sounds float at a meter away from my face. Wrapping up, I honestly feel that this should be the flagship all-in-one unit by FiiO. There is something about its sound that is always calling me back. Having just the right tonality and a thicker tone is somehow clicking with me every time I'm listening to music. And yeah, we have less power on tap compared to K19, and its resolving abilities are not as impressive, but when just staying there and listening to music and trying to be immersed in the experience, this is where K17 wins with a knockout. However, this is not a flawless unit right now. For example, I didn't talk at all about FiiO Control app, since the app wasn't updated yet to support it, and I cannot control all of the functions of the K17. Another thing I didn't talk about was FiiO DSP, only because Windows Defender and also Bitdefender didn't allow me to install this software. I tried white listening this app, I tried everything, I searched for workarounds, but I was unable to install it, so again, maybe in a couple of months there would be a workaround to install FiiO DSP and load the unit with a custom EQ. But even at this point, even without the FiiO app control and FiiO DSP, I see lots of value with K17. I was finally able to connect with my tunes. It was simply flawless via Roon and also AirPlay. It drove plenty of headphones, it was completely noiseless with ultra-sensitive amps, so again, I see plenty of value with this one, and I will recommend this one to you. Alright everyone, please let me know in the comment section below what you think about the FiiO K17. And as usual, thank you for watching, please consider liking and subscribing if you found this video helpful, and as usual, I'll see you very soon. Cheers!